Greetings, everyone, and welcome to Teaching Tales, episode 61. I am Brent Coley, your host, elementary principal in beautiful Southern California, and I'm really excited today. Joining me is the one and the only Chuck Poole. Chuck, how are you?
I'm doing great, Brent. Thanks for having me on the show. Excited to be here. I think it'll be a cool conversation.
Yeah, I am looking forward to this. We've been voxing back and forth. The stars have finally aligned, and I appreciate you are in school right now during a prep period or something like that. So I appreciate you taking the time, and because I have admired your work for a long time. Okay. Your podcast and now your Instagram stories, which we'll let you kind of talk about a little bit later in your book. But before we get to that, before we get into the stories, for anyone who has not yet growth mindset discovered Chuck Poole. Who is Chuck Poole?
Who is Chuck Poole? I guess, first and foremost, I'm a teacher, right? I teach middle school language arts in New Jersey, which I've been doing now for, 20 years, which has been interesting to actually say that out loud, to realize I've been doing it for that long, but absolutely love it. I also founded Teachonomy, Teachonomy.com. That's where my podcast is, which is called Teachonomy Talks, and my blog. You had mentioned the Insta stories. I just started that on Instagram under Teachonomy as well, which is cool. The goal there is kind of what I've been trying to do with my blog and podcast and everything else, and with my book, would be to encourage and inspire teachers so that they could go into their classroom to change the world. So that's basically my focus and mission, I guess you could say.
Well, if no one has told you recently, mission accomplished, because I'm being very sincere in saying that's why I've started this podcast, Teaching Tales, is I've said it and I'll say it again. Everybody loves stories. And I think that it's a medium that we can, like you said, encourage and inspire. So when I'm thinking of, who can I have on? You, with what you do with Teachonomy and your blog and your podcast and your book, you do just that. So, and the title of your book is Unforgettable. So I thought, what a great way to share some stories, because we were talking before we started recording that what teachers do that students remember, what students will leave a classroom remembering, is so often not the curriculum. And you said that you've got a couple of stories just kind of about how we can make ourselves, not from an ego perspective, unforgettable, but make learning unforgettable. So go ahead. I'll pass the virtual mic to you.
All right. Yeah. Honestly, when you asked me to come on the show, and we talked about that before the show a little bit as well, I was thinking of a couple of stories, and I actually thought of three specific stories. One, and the reason why I thought of these three is because I really believe that being unforgettable, or an unforgettable teacher, or just making an unforgettable impact, it can happen in multiple different ways. And I think sometimes we think we have to do these grandiose things in order for somebody to remember us. And I don't think that's true at all. I was thinking of three. One has to do with the teacher that I talk about in my book. Now, my book, it is called Unforgettable. And the interesting thing about it was that I was very intentional not to include specific stories of teachers or even specific stories about myself or my journey. One reason why is because I really wanted people who were reading it to understand that everybody is unique. Every teacher, that's my bell, by the way.
In the trenches, baby, in the trenches.
In the trenches. Every teacher is unique and has the opportunity to be unforgettable, and there's no need to compare ourselves with others and necessarily cause some kind of negative thought about ourselves. So I wanted to put that in there, but there was one teacher that I talk about in the beginning that I consider to be probably my most unforgettable teacher. And he was also my coach for years. I ended up coaching with him for 20 years, still in contact with him almost every day. So it's actually a cool experience. So one of my stories has to do with something that I learned from him, that just through his example. And it's an interesting thing. One of my stories was about a run-in that I had with a student 15 years after I taught him. And then the last one was something that I'm doing this year with the kids that I currently teach that has impacted me more than I thought it would. But the unforgettable aspect, I think, has nothing to do with me at all. So I wanted to kind of tie those stories in. We can chat about them if you want. So I think
go for it. No, please. That sounds great.
All right, cool. Well, my first story is about my unforgettable teacher. His name was he's Mr. Bills. And like I said, he was my coach for years, taught me for forever. And I mentioned him in my book. However, what he actually taught me was based on the example. And I'll tell you the quick story. It actually happened outside of the classroom, and it happened at a soccer camp when I was observing 8-year-olds. I don't know if you ever watched 8-year-olds play soccer. It can be
ants on a sugar cube. The ball shoots out and the mass. Yes, exactly.
And my job actually at this particular soccer camp, interesting enough, was to oversee the different age groups. We had groups that ranged from ages 5 to 18. And I had to make sure that the coaches in charge of these groups were providing quality training for the kids. And it just so happened on the day that I was observing the 8-year-olds, my unforgettable teacher and coach was in charge of one of the groups. And we had 48 8-year-olds that year. So we split them into 2 groups of 24, if that makes sense. So my particular coach was in charge of one, and there was another coach that was in charge of the other. And I had to watch both of them. Now, the interesting thing was both of them were being run by coaches that have been around the sport for 20 years or more. So they had both coached at the high school varsity level for quite a long time. To give you an idea of the coach that I look at as unforgettable, he's a Hall of Fame high school coach. He's had over 1,000 wins at the time, very successful. And the other guy had coached at the varsity level for 20 years as well. So I really didn't think that I was going to run into any issues. But what I saw was a totally different story. And the lesson that I learned through this, and you'll kind of see what I mean by it, was that there's a big difference between putting in years and experience. And I kind of carried that with me, essentially through my life. And it was all based on this one man's example. See, what I saw when I watched this, I saw one group of 24 8-year-olds. And what the coach had done is he set them up in 2 lines of 12. And it took each kid about 30 seconds to dribble through the cones, which meant that last kid it was about 6 minutes before he even touched the ball to go through. The other group, which was where my unforgettable teacher was, he basically he had developed 8 lines of 3. So the kids were a lot more active, and they had gone through it. Needless to say, the first group of 8-year-olds were nuts. They were running all over the place, kicking balls in the woods, chasing each other around. And the coach had spent more time wrangling them together than actually teaching them any skills. Where the second group, it was almost like they were a well-oiled machine. And they went through the drills, and it was fascinating to watch. But the funny thing was that second group that looked like a well-oiled machine was the least skilled of the 2. And when all was said and done, I had to debrief now with them, and I did. And after chatting with them and talking, that's when I kind of realized this crucial lesson, that there's a big difference between the amount of years you put in and the experience, because both of these coaches had coached for over 20 years. They had both coached at the same level, which was the varsity level, but only one of them kind of harnessed the experience they had gained over the years to fine tune and provide the best outcome, where the other one simply repeated what he'd done for years and blamed everything on, outside circumstances, kind of refused to take that ownership. So to come full circle on it, I think part of being unforgettable is taking the experience that we have and harnessing the lessons that we've learned to provide the best experience possible for our students. I think, I think when we do that, we can really make a difference,
Absolutely. And knowing that no matter how many years, I think one of the most dangerous, I heard somebody use the phrase once, and like using the word an experienced teacher, saying, I've been teaching for X number of years. I know what I'm doing. And it's just like, oh, and it was said in a way that was like, I don't have anything to learn. And I think that is just, one of the most dangerous mindsets, that whether you're in 1 year, 10 years, 20, 30 years, we all can take those experiences and mesh and mold our practice so that we're constantly improving.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, I think that if there's no growth or difference between how we taught during year 1 and how we teach in year 20, then I don't think we really can call ourselves experienced, right? I think we could have to say that we've just been teaching a long time.
Exactly. I love that.
You know, I know that for me, and honestly, like I know that I have fallen into this trap, and there's times when I may do that as, you know, coming in the future. I don't know. But what I do now, if I see myself heading in that direction, or if I see myself kind of falling back because I want to make things easier, I always think of that group of 8-year-olds and what I experienced, because I don't want to be the person that has to run around trying to wrangle and make excuses as to why something's not working, when I have the experience that I can pull on to make sure that it does.
What a great example. What a great example. Because those 8-year-olds were being 8.
Exactly.
Like how angry, how upset can you get? Hey guys, stop being 8. It's like, that's on me for not recognizing that they're 8, and they're gonna be running into the woods and doing stuff like that unless I give them the parameters and I put them in a condition, in a situation where they're going to be highly engaged and highly successful.
Exactly.
Awesome. Yeah. You mentioned a story of somebody out, a former student.
Oh, yeah. I had a former student, and his name is Matt, which I could say because no one's going to know who Matt is. It's a pretty common name. But an interesting thing is this, because I know in your book, you talk about how important the little things are. And I truly feel that what often makes a teacher unforgettable has to do more with the small things than it does with the grand gestures. And one story that I'll never forget, and it's interesting because it happened to me a few years ago, and I ended up getting a free meal at Olive Garden, so that was kind of cool too. But it was a Friday night, and I remember that because my wife and I usually go on date night on Friday night, and I decided that we were going to go to Olive Garden. So we thought, you know, it's simple. It was close to our house. We had a busy day, so we figured we'd go to Olive Garden, and it was super packed, so we had to wait. And when we finally were seated, the waitress, it was actually a waitress that came up. She introduced herself, and she took our drink order. But when she came back to the table with our waters, something weird happened, because she simply said something like, "I'm no longer going to be your waitress tonight. Matt's going to be taking care of you for the rest of the meal." Now, we had no idea who Matt was, and we had experienced before, like, waitresses and waiters sharing tables, but I didn't hear anyone literally drop water off and say, "I'm no longer going to serve you." And it was kind of awkward. My wife and I looked at each other and we were like, did we say something? What did we do that would make this girl not want to be our waitress? But within a few minutes, Matt comes in, and this made it even more awkward because he comes in and he had this giant smile on your face. I still can picture it now. And he took our order. He didn't say anything. He had this almost like a giggly type expression. And he took our order and he left, and it was really awkward. And my wife was kind of like, "What's up with that guy?" And I said, "I don't know what's going on. I thought we were like on a hidden camera show." But about 15 minutes later, he came back with our food, and he said to me, he asked me if I knew who he was or if I recognized him. And that's one thing that I hate when people do that.
That's a scary question out in public.
Exactly. Because I thought, how do I know him? And I honestly, I just said, you know what? I don't know who you are. So he smiled and he told me, he said, "You were actually my teacher 15 years ago when I was in 6th grade. So then as he started to tell me who he was, I pictured the 6th grade version of him, because he looked totally different, much taller, obviously, and his facial features were different. I would have never recognized him. And we were not in the town where I taught, so I would have never expected a student to be there. And so he starts telling me that I had taught him. But then he paused for a moment and he said, "You know, the reason why I took your table today is I saw you walk in and I recognized you." And I thought, wow, that's cool. And he said, "But I wanted to take your table because I've never had the opportunity to thank you, because in 6th grade, you changed my life." And I thought, I was racking my brain and I had no idea what he's talking about. And I said, "You know, Matt, thank you. That makes me feel great. But honestly, I don't know how I changed your life. What exactly did I do that would have done something like that?" And then he told me. And what he said was that when he was in 6th grade, he was being bullied. And he was a really shy kid, and he told me that it was happening more in the shadows. And he didn't say anything to anyone. He never told his parents, or at least at that point. But he said the one thing was the kid that was bullying him was also in the same class for one period with him, and it was mine. And he said the interesting thing was whenever he came into my class, he knew that that was the one place where he felt safe, because he said that the bully actually really liked my class and he liked me. So he knew that he wasn't going to do anything that would kind of jeopardize that kind of relationship in the class. Yeah. And he said he knew that I would have stepped in or whatever. So I said, oh, that's great. And I said, but I don't understand how that would have changed your life. And he said, no, that's not what did it. He said there was one day that he said we were walking out of class and you kind of walked us out, and the bully checked him with like a shoulder check and knocked him on the ground, and his books went all over the place. And he said that I immediately, and again, I don't remember this, but he said I immediately intervened. He said that I got the bully. I kind of reprimanded him a little bit, but pulled him back into my class. I bent down, helped Matt pick up his books, and pulled him in the class. And he said, but the thing that you did was, he said, I didn't yell at them. He said, what I did, I stared at the bully, and I had told him, I said, listen, this is what you need to know about Matt. And he said, and I then went through a bunch of positive things about Matt. And I told him all of the things that are great about this kid. And I don't understand why you would ever try and bully this kid at all. And then he said, that made him feel excellent and wonderful. And then he said, but then you looked at me and you told me all of the great things you thought about the bully. He said, that made him mad. And I said, okay. But he said, but what it did was it showed him that he had a lot more in common with the bully than he thought he did. And the bully had a lot more in common with Matt than he thought he did. And he said he walked away from that conversation. Him and the bully actually became friends. But he said he walked away from that confident in himself because no one had ever told him all of these things that I had just said to him. He said he never heard it from home. He never heard it from any other teacher. He never heard it from any other friends. He said it was the first time in his life that anyone told him he was good at anything. And I was speechless. You know, it was just something, literally a 5-minute conversation. I kind of wanted to diffuse something and let these kids know that I cared about them. But he said it was from that point on that he, for the rest of his life, anytime that he was in a tough situation, he remembered the words that I told him that day in 6th grade. And it literally changed his life. And I was speechless. I honestly couldn't believe that this kid was telling me the story. My wife was crying in the booth.
Sure.
And it was cool. And then he came up and he was like, you know, just to say thank you, I want to take care of this Olive Garden dinner for you. And I was like, no, not at all. But he you know, I let him do that, which was cool. I had free pasta. But the moral of the story was I couldn't believe that the littlest thing of just a simple compliment really changed the whole trajectory of this little 11-year-old's life, that now he still remembers it to this day. To me, I think that sometimes the little things that we do as teachers and we don't necessarily think is that big of a deal could be the thing that changes the way a student looks at themselves.
That's what a powerful story. And what struck me from that, and you mentioned it, is you don't remember it.
Yeah, I don't.
But that is so true that it speaks to the power that we as educators possess, regardless of our position, whether it's teaching 6th grade language arts at the middle school level, or being a site principal, or being the cafeteria worker or the playground aide. We have such power. I mean, that reminds me of a couple of years ago at the end of the year, we sent out a Jeff and I handing out messages of appreciation. So we sent out a Google form to all of our school community, students, staff, everybody, parents, to say, thank somebody for something that they've done this year. And it was awesome. We had over 1,000 responses. But one of the things that struck me was I got one from one of our 5th grade students, one of our girls. And she said, Mr. Coley, I want to thank you for helping me up on the first day of school when I fell. Huh. And I have no recollection. Of course, yeah. No recollection of her falling and me helping her up. That out of 180 days later, at the end of the school year, what she remembered was I helped her up when she tripped and fell. And it's like, that's a little thing, but it was a big thing. And I think the little things are the big things. And that's, wow, what a great Olive Garden Matt story. That is fantastic. And it is terrifying when somebody says, "Do you know who I am?"
Oh yeah,
that's the worst.
It's the worst because you kind of immediately,
because they don't look the same.
They don't look the same, and you immediately kind of scan through your brain who this possibly could be. And the worst is when they're a student that remembers you for a reason like this, and you don't even know who they are in the moment.
Yeah.
It's not a good feeling.
Yeah, because I used to teach 4th and 5th grade as well. So same type of thing when they come back and they're now taller than you, and if they're boys, a deep voice, and they don't look anything like they usually. Sometimes it's like, oh my gosh, you're just a 15-year-old version of the student that was in my class. But wow. And you said you had one more story.
Yeah, I do. I have one more story because I think the first two, really, I mean, there's so many different ways that I think we can be unforgettable, right? One could be just by the example we set, kind of like what Mr. Bills did for me. And one could be just doing the little things like apparently what I did for Matt that kind of transformed his life. But the third one is interesting. This happened this year. And I think another way teachers can be unforgettable is when they help students develop relationships with each other. So sometimes I think we worry about what we need to do to be unforgettable, or what we need to do to be able to last in their minds. And sometimes what we need to do is help them build relationships with each other that'll last. See, in middle school, which is where I've been teaching now for 20 years, I always see kids struggle to make friends. And it really breaks my heart. It seems to be, whatever reason, this age, it can be a tough age for a lot of kids. But this year, something different happened. I actually experienced that heartbreak I would say, firsthand on the look of a kid. I'd never really experienced it one-on-one, sitting right across from a kid. And this is kind of what happened. It was a few days before we had winter break. And a few teachers and myself decided that we would head into the cafeteria and have lunch with the kids. We do that every once in a while. We have a large school, so there might be 400 kids in the cafeteria at a time. So when we, just for the 6th grade. So then we go in for that, it's a big deal. The kids all want to sit with us and they want to hang out with us. It's kind of fun. So we decided, all right, let's do that. Let's hang out with the kids. And as I walked around, I was chatting with a bunch of different tables. I looked up and I saw that there was one table and there was only 4 girls sitting at the table, but none of them were talking to each other. So I walked up there and I just said hello, and they kind of glanced at me. Now I teach each one of these kids. So I know that they tend to be shy, but they weren't really saying anything. And so I got there and I asked them, where is everybody? Like, where's everyone else that normally sits? Because they were at a table that could seat 12 kids, but there was only 4 of them sitting there. And one of the girls looked up at me and she was sad, but she was just kind of eating her sandwich, if you can picture that. And she said, "Mr. Poole, we sit here because we don't have any friends." And when she said that, it literally broke my heart. And I kind of didn't know what to say at that moment. And I looked around and the other girls just kind of nodded, shrugged their shoulders, and went back to eating. And so then in the middle of this, it happened in a matter of 10 seconds, I came up with an idea. And I just was thinking, all right, how can I remedy this? Which I couldn't remedy the situation, but I told them that I actually came to their table because I wanted to invite them to be the first people in a secret club that I was forming that I was going to call the Underground. Now, at the point, I had no idea what I was talking about. I just said this to kind of see if they would be interested. And immediately their faces perked up. They were super excited. And they said, "Yes, we want to be part of the Underground. What is it?" So now I was kind of stuck. And I said, "Well, I can't tell you that right now because it's a secret, but we're going to start the club after break. And we're going to meet a couple times during lunch, or a couple times a week during lunch period. Would that work for you guys?" Oh, it would work. So then over break, I had to figure out exactly what the Underground would be.
Let's get all the logistics figured out.
Yeah, I had to figure out, what am I going to do with this now that I told these 4 girls what we're going to do. Now, my goal, essentially, while I was thinking through what I was talking to them, was to figure out a way to take them out of an environment that made them feel secluded and put them into one that welcomed them. And at lunch is when they felt most secluded. So I thought, well, how could I at least take them out for a bit and do that? And I had no idea what I was going to do. But over break, I created this idea for the underground, that it would be a secret society of sorts that would teach them how to make friends and how to kind of spread kindness throughout the building by going through missions that I would create. So they would essentially be these secret agents. Now in middle school, especially 6th grade, anything that's top secret and anything that they can be like a secret agent and no one else knows and it's very exclusive, it's very cool, right? Yeah. So they were super excited. So after break, I came back and we had our first meeting and the 4 girls were there. And I had created a couple of missions. And the first one that I told them, I walked them through, I gave them badges. So they have their own agent badge, which essentially was their lunch pass. So they would show the lunch pass, which I cleared with the cafeteria workers. Anytime they showed that, that meant they were going to be with me in my room. And so I gave them their pass. They had a special code name, made a really big deal about it. And then I gave them their first mission. And their first mission was, by the next week, what I wanted them to do was to find another student that they felt was maybe feeling the same way they were before break and invite them to the underground. Mm-hmm. So they said, okay, they were up for that mission. And the next week we had 12 kids in my room. So I thought, okay, this is great. So we had the 12 kids and I told them they were going to be the core agents of the underground. And we were going to try these missions for a couple of weeks. So what we did was we went through a couple of weeks and I gave them missions. And the goal with each mission was to help them develop friendships or help them get the social skills they would need to develop friendships. And my ultimate underlying goal was to help create a group for them to be a part of where they would build lasting friendships. And they didn't see that at first, but now fast forward, the interesting thing happened about 3 weeks ago, maybe a month now. I have 12 of the kids in this group right now. And they're very close with each other at this point. And this has just been since January. So in a couple of months, what they told me a couple of weeks ago, I asked them what they were doing this over the weekend. And one of the girls said, you're not going to believe it. We're having an underground movie viewing. And I said, well, what does that mean? And they said, all 12 of us, we already coordinated it with our parents. We're all going to meet and we're going to go to the movies on Saturday. We're going to hang out. It's going to be great. And the thing that I saw with that, and we still do missions and we kind of help spread kindness around the building. But what I noticed was that these 4 girls who it started with, who had absolutely no friends, now they come to my room usually twice a week. We've cut it out because they asked me, they said, we love doing the underground, but would it be cool if we came twice a week because we all sit at the same table at lunch and now we want to just hang out at lunch sometimes. Well, so now they come Tuesdays and Thursdays and it kind of went full circle. So the place where they most felt secluded now was where they felt very welcome because they had this group. And what I realized was that it's not me that they're necessarily going to remember because of this. They might remember, we had this underground group. But the thing that they're never going to forget is the friendships that they formed here, because now hopefully that will last a lifetime for them. And that's, I think, one way that we can be unforgettable as teachers, is we can do something as simple as offer or open a door for students and teach them how to build friendships and how to build relationships and help them nourish them along the way, because that will last far after they leave our classroom.
Absolutely. Yeah. You brought them in to give them that safe place, really with the goal that they wouldn't need to come in, that they would do it. And it totally, I mean, what a great story, because they may remember, like you said, the Mr. Poole's underground, but they're probably going to remember those friendships and the hanging out and the movie on Saturday. I mean, that's well done, Chuck. That's really cool.
It was cool, because I think sometimes for us, we almost want to think, for us to be unforgettable, we'll almost have to pull ourselves out because it's not necessarily about us, right? So for us to make that impact on the kids and to make their experience unforgettable, sometimes we just need to step back and just let them be them, and it's pretty cool. I think, and those 3 stories, again, anyone who's listening to the podcast, I hope will understand that being unforgettable may look different depending on the students and teachers, because we all have a unique skill set that we can bring. Sometimes we'll leave an unforgettable impact through the example, much like Mr. Bills did for me. Sometimes it'll be the little things that we do or say that become imprinted in the minds of our students, or it might just be opening a simple door to help them or provide them unforgettable memories and relationships that change their lives. I think being a memorable teacher, or unforgettable teacher, is definitely something that we all can do. I mean, the key thing to remember is that there are so many reasons that our students remember us, and every teacher that invests in the lives of their students will ultimately become someone's unforgettable.
Amen. Amen. Yeah, they're gonna remember us. The question is, for what?
Yeah, that's a good question.
For what? Well, I mean, as you were saying those last few sentences, it's like there's the title: making an unforgettable impact.
Yeah,
it's not about us. It's what kind of impact can we create? And as I like to say, I mean, it may be as simple as commenting on a kid's shoes. Or a kid's haircut, because that little boy's got her new pair of shoes, his new pair of shoes. He just wants somebody to notice.
Yeah, or helping him for the year.
Yep, exactly. Well, gosh, good stuff, Chuck. This mission accomplished once again. This I'm encouraged. So even if no one else is listening, I'm encouraged. So before we close, we've mentioned your book, we've mentioned your podcast. Once again, for anyone who wants to connect with you on Twitter and your website and your podcast, how can they do that?
Yeah, you could easily contact me, even if you go to Teachonomy.com. That's an easy way to do it. I have a little, conversation starter thing. You can pop in there, say hello to me, and I'll be happy to start sending you encouragement every week if you want. Twitter, I'm at cpoole27, Poole with an E at the end. And you can feel free to reach out to me there, private message me any way I can help. I would love to. And then obviously if you wanted to check out the book, you can go to unseries.com. You can check out my book as well as the next two books, because I'm producing the whole series. So there's a couple more books coming out from some amazing people. J.C. Maslick's writing one, and Rochelle Dean Poth is writing one. So we have some great authors lined up for the next two, and then some more coming down the road. So that's exciting. So any of those places, I'd be more than happy to chat with anyone who wants to.
Awesome. And for anyone who has not already listened, your podcast, the Teachonomy Talks, and I really like the 2-minute timeout for teachers, because whereas what we're recording here is going to be about 30 minutes, in nice bite-sized pieces that somebody, if you got a short commute, you can drive, you can listen on your way in and be encouraged to start the day. So, and your book as well is it does its job. Your job is to encourage and inspire and let people know that anybody can be unforgettable. And so kudos. Well done, Chuck.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Well, and I thank you again for taking the time. I need to let you go because you've got kids coming in a few minutes for your next period. And I thanks again for your time. And for everyone listening, thank you. Appreciate you tuning in. If you haven't already done so, please be sure to subscribe. We're in iTunes, Google Play, on Spotify as well, or you can listen directly at brentcoley.com on the podcast page. And until next time, have a good one.